When our director of campus and civic engagement emailed me about giving this talk, he wrote, "I heard that you are an expert in yoga." And I could feel the nervous poo coming on just at the very notion, seeing those words on the screen. But I said yes immediately because I knew that there was a message about yoga that needed to be shared. And as I went back through my journey with yoga, the more that I saw that that message was about healing. And that's what I'd like to share with you. What yoga taught me about healing through stopping and checking in, through movement, and through self-love, and the practice of healing. The first thing that I got from yoga was an invitation to stop and check in. Most yoga classes will begin in this way, asking you to become still, to notice that you are breathing, to notice your thoughts and your responses to those thoughts, and to check in with your physical body. I came to yoga in 2009. I was earning my master's degree. I was going to church every week. I had an active journaling practice. And with all of those things, I thought that I was a pretty self-aware and reflective person. But I still found myself coming to a friend and telling her that I just needed clarity in my life. And it was her suggestion to come and check out this yoga class that she'd been going to. Now, all of this stopping and checking in, and even just the mystique of yoga, had me really feeling that yoga was going to offer me something that I didn't already have. And this idea of this mystique was completed when I journeyed to the very first place where I ever did yoga, and that meant crossing a hanging bridge that had chimes hanging off of it over the Estero River into a bamboo screened-in porch. So talk about my impression of being like, hey, it's not going to be very long before I start to look like this. Instead, yoga presented me with myself, exactly as I was. No more, no less. My thoughts, my emotions, not some blissed out version of myself. And this was a major bummer for me. So what I had to start to understand was what healing was really going to be about. She wasn't talking about yoga in the context of this passage, but one of my very favorite authors pretty much sums up how I arrived at yoga. And she talks about seeing and being able to stand what you see. And what I saw was that I didn't need clarity at all. I knew full well that my marriage was coming to an end. And what I needed was a way to be with and make my way through the muck of guilt and shame and crippling sadness that comes with walking away from the thing that you thought you wanted most in the world. And so stopping and checking in turned into ridding me of my misconceptions about healing. And in addition to that, yoga offered me an invitation to move. Now, as a culture, we are excellent at moving. There are so many things that beckon to us to move all the time. But the intention behind that movement for many of us is about distraction and escape. The intention behind the movement in yoga is about acceptance and mindfulness. Now, as you can imagine, I had my hands full already with acceptance and mindfulness just with step one, stopping and checking in. So then I made my way into downward facing dog. Now, even if you've never been to a yoga class before, odds are you've probably heard of this hallmark pose of yoga. When I tell people that I am a yoga instructor for the first time, this is the response that I usually hear. I think yoga would be good for me, but you can probably fill in the blank. I don't have the body type for it. I'm not flexible. Mind you, I came to yoga from a very athletic background. I played college soccer. I came up playing softball. And then, as now, I appeared as if I was the poster child for yoga physically. In no way did any of those things prepare me for this pose. This was the mother of uncomfortable poses for me. And so were many of the other poses. Most of the Warrior series, and I'll admit to you, Warrior 3, to this day, I'll still grit my teeth and offer a little bit of hatred toward any instructor that calls Warrior 3. So it was uncomfortable, physically, hamstrings hollering, heels that felt like they were a foot off the ground in downward-facing dog, and no matter what wonderful cues the instructor was giving, melt your heart toward your thighs. This was not doing me any good, and uncomfortable physically and mentally uncomfortable, what my TCC students would call epic fail. So the uncomfortableness was something that I had to deal with, accept, right, and be mindful about it. But throughout all of this discomfort, I was offered a culture that was incredibly warm and accepting. I will never forget being in a yoga space and hearing everyone breathe, and knowing that everyone had come there because they just wanted to feel peaceful. That in itself felt like I had accomplished something just by being there. Yoga also offered the choice to move. Now, this was a freedom that I had never known. Again, coming from an athletic background where if you were good, you made the cut, and you were first string. But to look around the room and hear the instructor encouraging everybody to do poses in a way that felt right for them, and to see people taking advantage of that, doing a modification of a pose, or not doing a pose at all. When I started to allow myself that kind of freedom to be honest with myself about how I was showing up on my mat, and then make choices based on how I was feeling, however that was, the harder it got to ignore when I wasn't making choices like that off of my mat. Getting into a relationship for the wrong reason, staying in a relationship for the wrong reason, making plans just for the sake of making plans. Yoga also taught me that movement begets movement. Oftentimes when we are feeling uncomfortable, either physically or emotionally or mentally, movement seems like the worst possible idea because it may very well mean pain. I have struggled with anxiety for most of my life. And when it's at its worst, it's awake in the morning before I am. My eyes won't even be open. I will barely register consciousness about the day. And no matter what the day holds, even if it's a day full of wonderful things, the chance to teach, a meetup with someone very dear to me, or a day with no plans at all, this unnameable reason for dread will settle over me. And still, to this day, my initial reaction is, don't move. If you move, it could get worse. You could drown in this feeling. But if I remember that I can move, and if I remember that I can breathe deliberately, consciously, then I might glimpse for just a moment to see that energy, that anxiety move also. Even if it comes back later on, I've seen just for that moment that there's always something on the other side to however I'm feeling. So I was learning all of these really great things. I was coming to a new understanding through yoga. But I still was not prepared for the next thing that I was about to learn about self-love and the practice of healing. So I encountered what appeared to me, about 3 years into my practice, a setback. I was practicing a style of yoga that I was brand new to, and it was allowing me to do all manner of tricked out poses. And I reached what I thought was really the apex, the plateau of my physical practice. And I mean, we're talking about moments of triumph where I would do some standing balance pose and I'd want to look around and shout out, "Who saw what I just did?" But despite these, really awesome moments, I couldn't help but feel that something was missing. And the more I got that feeling, the more I tried to ignore it. Because I was practicing yoga. Yoga had presided over this really dark emotional time for me. I had checked the box of healing. But the truth is somewhere along the way, I had replaced acceptance and mindfulness with escape and distraction. And I was using yoga to do that so that I didn't have to square with the fact that I didn't enjoy my own company. The problem of self-love And as I came to understand this, gave me a front row seat to understand this and to know how long this had been with me. And added as a little bit of a PS, you can't vinyasa your way out of this. Do as much yoga as you like. I taught yoga to the Boys and Girls Club over this summer. And by the way, my whole experience teaching yoga to them were just unbridled moments of them teaching me. And in their thank you letters to me, I noticed this problem of self-love come up again. This one signs her note, "The worst one in the class." You would think by that wildly harsh self-assessment that she had been biting other students while she was practicing yoga. This other letter is similar. Starts off very positively, all of the wonderful things that yoga had brought her, but she ends it by talking about the one pose that she couldn't do. So yoga offers these wonderful healing messages, but as I have experienced it, and as I notice with these young people, this idea of self-acceptance, no matter what you're working on, no matter how you're trying to grow, this idea of healing, being whole, is so hard to accept. So healing is a practice. Suzuki Roshi is a Zen monk, and he describes healing as walking a long time through a light mist. And the practice feels as if you might walk and walk and walk and never feel as if you are getting wet. It's not until you arrive at your destination that you look down and notice that your coat is soaked. I can't tell you at what moment I forgave myself for the breakup of my marriage. I don't know when I really started to do the work of loving myself. But I do know that yoga gave me a safe place to practice, to work, even if I didn't always take advantage of it, either because I was too scared or too complacent. And I will leave you with this. Yes, I am championing yoga. Yes, yoga works for me. But it's not the only way to heal. And healing, for that matter, every time I have encountered it, has been frightening. And I have found no shortcuts through it. But when I was faced with the pain of change and the pain of staying the same, every time I made the choice to heal, that choice really was what healed me all along. Thank you.